For my last couple of sessions, I've been playing with this Friday Widebody paddle. Now here's the thing, this paddle is not going to be coming out for another few months, so this is a prototype. And while I kind of give you guys my opinion on this Widebody paddle by Friday and in general about wide bodies to begin with, I'm going to show you a bunch of clips from my very last game that I played with this paddle. It's a 5-0 plus game. A lot of great points were had there. So as I talk to you guys, all these points are gonna be rolling through. It's about 20 minutes worth of footage, but it's worth watching it because I think a lot of those points are just very cool. But now for those of you that have been watching my content for a while now, you might know that I've always gravitated towards playing with elongated paddles, right? My main essentially being that Agassi by Yola. I've also been messing around with the Arma T by Holbrook as of late, but the biggest theme between all my paddles that I've been using over the past 2 years of playing pickleball have always been the shape, the fact that it's elongated, right? The face being long, right? The wide body, compared to any other paddle shape, it's the shortest and it's the widest, right? So if I align it, right? If I align it, you kind of get a glimpse here of the difference in height, right? And the difference in width between the two. Now you might notice that in the Pro Tour, for example, a lot of people are rocking elongated paddles for the most part, and that's because a lot of players tend to come from a tennis background, and a tennis racket is a bit more of an elongated shape, and on top of that, tennis rackets tend to be head heavy, and an elongated shape tends to be the most head heaviest type of setup that there is. So that's very familiar. I've messed with wide body paddles in the past. I've used the ESQ for a little bit. I've even tried the Scorpius by Yola. So I've kind of gotten a small glimpse. And for the most part, my biggest issues, outside the fact that the sweet spot's also way lower on a wide body paddle compared to elongated paddle, right? So if we look at this elongated paddle, so this is the typical sweet spot here. It would be around like right here, I would say. That's pretty much where you'd want to be hitting, right? So just a little bit above that center mark. The Agassi is a special paddle, which I've really enjoyed, is the fact that instead of it being up here, the sweet spot, which is normally where elongated shape would have it, it's actually even a little bit higher. And again, coming from tennis, you usually are hitting that top third of the section for your serves and for your drives. A wide body is very different. The wide body is actually directly in the middle. So that makes it tough, because I'm almost never hitting that center part. And what you'll find between different paddles, and depending what technologies that they use, is that the drop off of power from that sweet spot and as you go outwards is very, very different, right? So with the PaddleTech ESQ, it's got a very powerful sweet spot in the middle, but as you move away from it, it drops down severely to the point that if you're hitting that top of an ESQ paddle, the ball barely even comes off of it, right? That was my issue of it, because I'm always knocking on the top portion of a wide body. There's no question about it, because I'm knocking on the top portion of elongated paddle. I mean, you may not be able to see it, but I have ball marks that go up front. Oops, that go all the way up to the very top. Very, very common for me to be hitting within half an inch, if not a quarter of an inch of the top on an elongated paddle. So you can imagine that on a wide body, it's even more so. It's even more prominent, right? Where even quote unquote my sweet spot is still gonna be up here somewhere. And that doesn't really work for most wide bodies. But that actually changed with this Friday paddle, which is why I've actually been having pretty good success with it as of late. That drop off that I'm talking about, where you go from that sweet spot and as you spread out, it's not that severe, believe it or not. Now, I usually see about 2 different drop offs. A lot of paddles have like 2 drop offs, where you might have, let's say, let's take this Holbrook for example, right? So you might have a sweet spot over here, right? This is where you get the most amount of power. And then let's say if I move up a little bit here, I'm still gonna get some decent power, but it's gonna be lower. It's gonna be obvious that's gonna be lower. And then you might, if I go a little higher, it drops off considerably more. The Holbrook, actually, the second drop off is very, very severe, to the point that if I'm dinking sometimes and I'm hitting a 2-handed backhand roll, I will actually hit the bottom of the net sometimes, because it drops off very, very aggressively. Very similar to like an ESQ drop off, but the ESQ drops off from from further away from the very top than it does in the Holbrook. The Holbrook up here somewhere, right? maybe half an inch off. That's where that drop off is just like crazy bad. Any SQ you might need to move down a little bit more, and then you still have a very severe drop off. The Friday paddle doesn't really have that. The Friday paddle to me almost feels like there's only one drop off, where we've got that sweet spot here, which I am not interacting with that often. But once you move away from it and there's that drop off, it's very similar across everywhere here. And that makes it interesting because I actually feel like in my games when I'm playing, I'm actually just hitting non-sweet spot after non-sweet spot, and it's working for me. So I feel that as an elongated user, this Friday paddle is actually a decent gateway towards trying a different shape, because I'm not handicapping myself to the extent where I'm like, wow, like these balls are not going over the net, I'm not able to counter right, I'm not able to put balls away. I mean, you're seeing all these points here. I'm playing pretty damn well. In some instances, do I wish I had a little bit more power? Of course, but that's because I'm hitting probably the top portion of this paddle. But no matter what, I mean, there's even some defensive points that you might have seen already by now where I'm barely even reaching the ball, and I'm hitting the ball like a quarter of an inch from the top, and I'm still getting quite a bit of pace back over the net. And that's very unique. Now, I'm gonna say this much. If you're asking for the specs of the Friday Fever, you're asking the wrong person here. I know very little about it. The numbers are out there. I just haven't put in the time to put them on the screen or even care so much about that, to be honest. But what I do know, and I spoke to the owners of Friday, they did give me a small little tidbit about, you know, the technology that went into it. Now, this is a Gen 3 paddle. It's got a 10 millimeter core, but they did do something unique. They did add perimeter weighting that did sound unique to me. Now, when I say it does sound unique to me, keep in mind that I do watch a lot of the videos out there that discuss all the new paddles that go out on the market. So I have a general idea as to what the other paddle companies are doing, how they are separating themselves from others, right? Like I understand that Holbrook, for example, is using 2 different cores and so on. What Friday is actually doing, or the way they added weight around the face, I have yet to hear another paddle company do that. And that alone might be the reason why there is not that much drop off in power once you walk away from that sweet spot. Well, let me correct myself. There is a drop off in power, but it doesn't continue to drop off. There's not 2 layers of drop off. There's just 1 layer of drop off. Now, the second question you might be asking me, well, why do I even care to play with a wide body? Why not stick with one of these elongated paddles? And that's a fair question, but 2 months ago, I watched a video of John Q and Jack Monroe, and I very much agree with Jack Monroe's point of view on wide body paddles, and he plays with a wide body himself. And he basically said, listen, he likes wide bodies because they're way more forgiving and your hand speed is much quicker. And in his eyes, having fast hands and being able to counter at the net is single-handedly the most important part of being a great pickleball player. I do believe that as time goes by, players will be much quicker on the court, they'll be much more accurate on the court, and everyone's gonna try to eke out any additional edge that they can out of their paddles. Right now, people are eking out edge out of their paddles based on power. More importantly, countering power, right? That's kind of what matters the most. People want to know, how great is that pop? How well do we counter, right? The mod, for example, had great countering power, right? Everybody hopped all over that. The Holbrook has fantastic countering power. Everybody, you know, really loves it as a power paddle. Obviously, there's some issues of possibly quality control and so forth, but that's kind of what people are looking for in edge in paddles. It comes to how well it counters. Well, I think into the future, it's going to be that, but more importantly, how quick can you move this paddle and how forgiving is it, right? That I've spoken about the fact that of the Agassi, the weakness is actually that if you hit dead center in the paddle, somewhere down here, let's say, it doesn't counter that great. It feels like a miss hit, right? You actually want to be countering a little bit higher, but that's tough because like if you're trying to, you know, move your hands quick, it's tough to nail a little bit higher than the middle. It's much easier to just get that middle, right? But you feel you're mishitting. The wide bodies, the sweet spot, you know, it's stretched out to the edges here where you can be hitting out into these edges and still be getting very good countering. And as I said of the Friday, for example, it doesn't have 2 drop-offs, it has 1 drop-off. So you get very used to the fact that, okay, if I'm not hitting that direct center here, you're still getting very good countering power almost across the face to the very edge. And I do think that as time goes by, people are like, wait a minute, Me having a paddle that allows me to have significant countering power across almost the whole face and have my hands be a little quicker is really important. So I do think that with time, we will see players gravitate more towards the wide body because it does allow us for quicker hand speed and allows us for maximum forgiveness. Does that mean in the next year, 2 years, this is what most players will be playing with, this particular shape? No. But I think if we can fast forward 5 years from now, this particular shape, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe half the tour is using it at that point in time. Because again, the game will only get quicker. And to catch up to that, you gotta be playing with a paddle that allows you to stay quick with your hands and a paddle that allows you to give you the most forgiving countering across the board. Because I also think that, hey, if we fast forward 7, 8 years from now, so I consider myself to be like a 5-0 player, let's say, I'm pretty sure that 7, 8 years from now, if someone were looking at the games that I'm posting right here, people would say like, oh, these players are maybe 4-2-5, right? And the reason I say it is because the floors can be raised as to what it takes to be a 5-0, what it takes to be a 4-5. Players, again, will move quicker, they will react quicker, the paddles will be more accurate. And again, I think that the wide body is where the future is going to be. With that being said, let's talk a little bit about the Friday paddle. How does it feel? To me, it feels very soft, quite easy for me to drop with it. If you guys look, I'm actually very comfortable now dinking with the paddle, especially on the forehand side. Again, because I'm interacting with the non-sweet spot of the paddle, it's actually giving me access to angles I normally would not have, because previously if I were to try for that angle, I would be hitting a sweet spot and the ball would be just popping off the paddle a little quicker than I wanted to, so I can't inflict as much spin as I would want it on it. But now, the ball comes off a little slower off that spot because it's not a sweet spot, and I can actually do some things with the paddle that I normally would not be able to do before, which makes this paddle interesting for me because now I'm actually having shots introduced in my game that previously I was not able to do. On the backhand side, I do struggle a little bit with my two-handed dinks. There's still instances, as you've seen probably for the clips now, they look perfectly fine. I do think that with the Agassi, they're a bit more aggressive, so that's something I have to work out. But again, usually when I'm dinking with two hands, I am kind of overthinking the process and trying to figure out, because I do have to adjust where I'm hitting the ball. Because of the Agassi, I also know that I was hitting very high up on my backhand dinks, but I can't go really that high up here because at that point I'm kind of beginning to hit that frame, so I have to bring it lower. So that's more of like a footwork thing. Speed ups, you've seen some speed ups by now. Really good speed ups of the paddle. They feel good, they feel very accurate, great action of them. Now for my serves, I mean, truth be said, I had the biggest serves on the court, right? And we had what on the court? We had an armor tee used by Anthony. He was smacking the hell out of every ball except the serve. We had a Yola 4 Perseus on the court, and then we had a True Foam on the court, right? I was getting, I think, the most pace with my paddle. When it came to drives, pretty decent power on the drive. That armor tee that was wielded by Anthony. Anthony's always hits massive shots to begin with. But with the armor tee in his hand, yeah, his drives were way harder than mine. This is probably one spot where you feel a little bit of a reduction, but it's still not that bad. For a wide body, I was still getting a lot of action on my drives. And it's actually, believe it or not, the Friday actually comes in at 8.2 ounces stock. I'd say kind of heavy, no? And it is head heavy. So it's which is kind of why in the beginning I said it's a nice little gateway paddle for elongated players to give a wide body a go, because you are getting a paddle that is head heavy to begin with, similar to how an elongated paddle is, plus the fact that it's not that second drop off, so you actually can be mishitting per se and still hitting that sweet spot that you normally would with an elongated paddle, but you could be using that here and still get good action off it. When it came to the returns, those felt perfectly fine to me. Resets out of the air feel good. Resets off the bounce struggle a little bit with the paddle so far. I think I have to just simply get used to where the pop is coming off the paddle. That's something I could normally get used to. Roll volleys, everything feels good there. Putaways, I mean, again, I'm probably, there is definitely a drop off in power compared to, the two paddles in front of me. I'm not gonna lie about that. You definitely do feel it. But normally speaking, again, it gives you enough power that as long as you're placing the ball, in many cases, it's not coming back. And if we take a look at how I have this paddle weighted up, I have 7 grams on each side. 2 grams here, this is 2 grams here, and this should be 3 grams. Yeah, so that's kind of how I have it set up here. And I do have about 6 grams around the grip, and I kind of have 2 over grips going on this paddle. 9.2 ounces altogether, so yes, it's a hefty paddle. Now, as far as I know, this paddle, when it publicly launches, as I said, in 2-3 months, it's probably going to be about maybe $120 of a code. If there is a code, by the way, I'll put it in my pinned comment when it comes out if you guys want to use my code for that. There might be changes to the paddle, by the way. There might be another prototype afterwards. Maybe they'll make a few changes about it. If that's the case, I'll probably make an updated video on the paddle. I think if you're looking for a paddle you could best compare it to in terms of the power and the pop, would probably be the from 11.624, their new alpha powers. It seems to me like that power profile and the pop profile is kind of similar to that. The pop could be slightly less, so I noticed that with the Friday paddle, you cannot just rely on blocking the ball on your counters. You have to punch back constantly to stay competitive within that point. And the thing is, though, that's actually good training no matter what, because you'll notice with the pros, when they're countering of one another, nobody's sitting there for the most part and countering like this, right? Just like moving the paddle 6 inches back and forth. Very often when they're in these big hand battles, they're kind of still swinging. They're swinging, 1-2 feet at each other because they have to keep that velocity going. Because if they just put the paddle out there, for the most part, they're still gonna be pulling off way too much power off it and they'll get attacked again. So I've been enjoying this because in the very beginning, yes, I struggled a little bit of the pop because something like the Armor T, which has a lot of pop, if someone's attacking me, I could just kind of counter of just 5-6 inches of action and still get that ball back quickly. With the Friday, that's not going to be the case. That's not enough, to keep that ball down on people. You gotta be a little quicker, but that's good. That means you have to essentially get a better read on that ball, right? So I have to pay more attention. Okay, is it being sped up? Okay, let me begin my motion. Your reactions to be a little quicker, your footwork has to be a little bit better to make sure that you have that time to be swinging, which all of this makes you a better player. Now again, keep in mind, I'm not saying that you have to have a big swing and overswing. There's a fine difference between when you're countering to have a good enough swing versus too big of a swing, right? There is a fine difference between the two. And I know this Friday paddle right now, I am currently working and developing a very good difference where I'm jumping on the ball, I'm having enough of a swing where I'm putting pressure on it. And hell, if I ever swap to a paddle that has more pop, it's only going to benefit me more because I'm not just now benefiting off the fact that I have a construction that's more poppy. It's also off the fact that, hey, I've kind of trained myself to create time for myself to actually have a bit more of a swing on these counters. But that's my opinion on the Friday Fever. Again, it's a fun paddle. If it does come out, if you're an Elongated user, give it a go. I actually think it's a fun paddle to use. I'm using it right now. I plan to use it for the next few weeks. Actually, the Friday guys are coming into town this coming week. I'll have a chance to play against them. If you're still watching this video till this point, I think I'll be playing maybe against Scott and TJ a few games. Which is like their 5-0 plus guys. If you have any predictions as to how I would do against them, you can leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Hopefully I can film some of those games and see how I do against them. But other than that, thank you so much for watching this video. Throw me a like and subscribe if you haven't. And if you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments below. Thank you and have a great day.